To say first that I have spoken to both Heather and Erin about this, and I have volunteered to edit the proceedings of this one-day conference. And what I would like to do is have, until it comes out, I will try to get a publisher for it too, but I would like all of the speakers to send to me a first rough draft. This is for the speakers at this conference, and there have been many from the beginning of the day on. Whatever they would like to have me think about as what their topic is, so I can get some sense of a possible table of contents. And I'm setting a deadline, we thought maybe a week from this Friday. I think that was the day we thought, to send to me by my usual email, stotsky@aol.com, and then you would have another few weeks or months, to the end of the month maybe, to finish off a rough draft for whatever we would be then used as working document in progress, and I'll see about getting a publisher for it. But I think this would be a valuable set of proceedings to have in print for people, particularly in light of what the person in the balcony who was asking a question about what would be available, I think would be much better to have written papers available from everybody here. And there'll be time for everyone to finish. I'll be happy to answer questions later on, but let me just get to some of the points I'm going to make about the issues in the ELA standards. I would like to begin, though, with another little analogy. I was speaking to someone in the arts in Massachusetts the other day. I had known about him for many years because he used to be the co-director of the Kodayi Institute, which is music education for young children. And he has been very active at the state and to some extent on the national level. There is now an attempt being made to develop national standards for all the performing arts that align with Common Core. And he is horrified by what he is seeing coming out. So this isn't the analogy that he gave me, but I could think of, and this is something you can think about and check around with music teachers. The violin teachers will be explaining all the strategies for how you finger a violin or a cello or any other stringed instrument, and then maybe after 4 or 5 years, they will teach what first position is, what second position is, so that they then learn exactly what the professional position is. But in the meantime, they have explored all the other options and, of course, are thoroughly confused and make a mess of whatever they do and will never learn the right positions, because I know this has happened before with precociously young musicians who explore fingering positions on their own, develop their own habit, and then can never adjust to the right fingering positions. But this apparently is the kind of inquiry method that is going to be applied to the arts. Sounds like a disaster, and all I'm saying is that there's another area to worry about beside math, English, and science, all the arts. And music happens to be one that I'm particularly interested in, so I am concerned. Let me get to the issues with the ELA and then some suggestions on what I think might be done that fit with a few questions that I've heard. What are the major problems in ELA with Common Core? First of all, and it's been said before, both sets of standards, the college readiness and the grade level reading standards, are content-free skills. They're not content or culture specific, they are simply skills. Skills can be applied at any level to any kind of reading, and I've used in the past something like, you can find the main idea of the Three Little Pigs, you can find the main idea of Moby Dick. There's nothing about finding the main idea that is specific to any particular grade level by itself or to any particular quality of literary or non-literary reading. A skill actually emerges from the content on which it operates, and this is as true in, say, music as it would be in reading. But if you have skills, you can apply the skill to anything, and that's one of our problems today. We do not know what the tests are going to be for college readiness in English language arts at grade 11, because we really don't know what passages, kind of passages, the difficulty level of the passages that will be used, and then what the cut score will be once we know what the difficulty level of the passage is. And until we know what their difficulty level is, anything is possible. It won't be the Three Little Pigs, but it could be somewhere, something between. We just don't know. And that's worrisome, and I've been after some of the people involved in Park for 3 years to find out if there's anything about a grade level score. No, because the ELA standards simply contain almost nothing to give you any sense of where the passages will come from necessarily, except for those 2 or 3 content-rich passages that deal with American literature and with our seminal political documents. And so far, I, by the way, have seen no examples yet from either SBAC or from Park on our seminal political documents. I have been looking to see whether they release any sample items that address the only few content standards we have. So far, nothing on our seminal political documents. So whether they will emerge or whether they will be totally ignored, which may happen. The second flaw is what has also been mentioned, and what this particular documentary that we were just seeing is related to, and relates to the problem that from K to 12, over 50% of reading instructional time must be devoted in the reading or English class to something called informational texts. They may be nonfiction, which is something English teachers have always dealt with at the high school level, but never over 50% of their time. Less than 50% will be literary study. This is from K to 12. This has nothing to do with that 30-70 issue, which has totally confused everybody and which David Coleman and Sue Pimentel refused to clarify. The 30-70 comes from a NAEP chart, which I actually was involved in. I was fighting it, as a matter of fact, in 2003, 2004, because it was about the percentages of passages on NAEP tests. It had nothing to do with the English language arts curriculum, and Mary Crovo, who was then in charge of the project for under NAGB, and the NGBY, National Assessment Governing Board, thank you. There's too many acronyms here for me to deal with the end of the afternoon. But the point was that there was supposed to be a very clear disclaimer in NAEP's reading assessment standards that said that these percentages had nothing to do with the English curriculum, in particular because NAEP has never assessed drama. They claimed that dramatic passages would be too long. So they have never assessed drama to begin with. So that 30-70, which is what is the ratio for literary passages versus informational passages for the high school NAEP test in reading, is only for tests, not for the English curriculum, and Common Core got it totally muddled and refuses to straighten it out. But the 50-50 is there, and this is what is happening around the country. Many state departments of education, if not school districts, have told their English teachers that they may probably only have time for one long novel, maybe during that one half of the year for 50% of the time, or they may have only time for excerpts. And the one English teacher I knew who was teaching the Odyssey was told that indeed all they would have time for would be excerpts from the Odyssey because there was too much informational text that they needed to cover at the same time. All right, so that is second flaw. Third would be related to it. Common Core reduces opportunities for students to develop critical thinking. Where does critical thinking generally come from in terms of how students learn to read between the lines? Typically from the English class. You're not learning to read between the lines with a science textbook or a history textbook or a math textbook typically, or any other textbook in any other subject. They are informational, and they're usually written to convey information. the authors of these textbooks are not trying to write in such obscure or literary or ambiguous ways so that you have to learn how to read between the lines of your math textbook and understanding what the math textbook is trying to tell you to do. So that is typically not part of what an informational text by definition is trying to accomplish. It is trying to convey information, and while nonfiction texts can be used in certain proportions to help you understand rhetorical issues, the logical or rhetorical kinds of, I'm forgetting the word to use for them, figures of speech, the logical non sequiturs, the rhetorical matters that an English teacher typically introduces students to in the last few years of high school. They don't use science textbooks or math textbooks or even history textbooks for those purposes. And they will use a few speeches, a few essays, a few biographies for that purpose, and they always have traditionally. Now they must expand, and what we're seeing flooding in to the English class are huge numbers of political speeches which have no particular relationship in terms of coherence to the rest of the English curriculum. They are there to teach what persuasion is, although it's not called persuasion, it's called argument, and it is not teaching critical thinking, it's teaching students attitudes rather than critical thinking. The other issue is one that I've become more aware of, and I'm just going to spend most of the time that I have left talking about the fact that what I now realize after doing an analysis of a comparison between Georgia's old standards and Common Core's is that one of the real hidden problems with Common Core standards in English is that they spend much more time on writing than reading at every grade level. I began to just count the number of standards. I've seen a lot of reference to the fact that many middle grades are now orienting their entire English and reading curriculums around writing genres. But that is a false and a very poor way to begin to teach students what they need to know. There is ample evidence from maybe 100 years of research in reading that writing depends on reading, not the other way around. And if you have a curriculum that emphasizes writing more than reading, children are being deprived of what they need in order to read their textbooks. This is a false emphasis. And Common Core is doing this because, as far as I'm concerned, David Coleman doesn't know the research and had no idea. He might have had a benefit, he might have been, to be charitable, he might have thought this was good for children, that they needed to spend more time writing, but good writing needs to be modeled by good reading. And it's the good reading that must be stressed at every grade level from K to 12. Without good reading, no good writing is going to ever develop. So this is a very serious issue because it slants the entire English and reading curriculum the wrong way. The inappropriateness, the developmental inappropriateness people have mentioned before, including your sister, who did a very nice job in her documentary. So yes, that has been picked up at various grade levels. There's a mismatch between the writing and the reading standards. Let me just finish off by saying we know certain things. First of all, Common Core standards are not rigorous, and my writings deal with exactly how that is so. They were designed to, and this is where I come out on the limb, to allow low-performing grade 11 students to enroll in credit-bearing courses in a non-selective college. That's the burden of the whole problem there. Its standards are not internationally benchmarked and will not make our students competitive. 3, there is no research to support Common Core's stress on writing instead of reading, and there is no research to support Common Core's stress on informational reading instead of literary study. In addition, there is no research to support the value of the cold reading of historical documents, which is not in Common Core standards, but is something that David Coleman has been promoting in his own workshops on the Gettysburg Address and I think one other, Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. You cannot read historical documents acontextually. You must have context for reading them. Now, what could people do? The first thing I would like to suggest, and it responds to what the woman in the balcony was asking about, or maybe it was someone downstairs, I think we need to think more about matriculation exams in every state for entrance into the higher education system. This would be of particular value to homeschoolers, students in private schools, whether sectarian or non-sectarian. But the idea is that you need to escape from SATs, ACTs, GEDs, and anything that's aligned to Common Core. And what our higher ed institutions in every state need to do, which is what Finland and many other countries, not all, but many of them do, is have a test that declares whether you are eligible for entrance into your university system. And then there are other tests or other ways of determining whether the student really should go on to the university system. But to me, the basic Anglo-Saxon principle of fragmented power, in order to fragment this centralization or consolidation of power for determining what kids can do in order to get into college, which started with the development of the college boards in 1900, in response to the elite colleges' need for a common set of entrance exams to get into college. This is when college boards began, about 1900. I think we need to decentralize the entire system. Each state has its own higher ed faculty develop its own matriculation exam for its own state. It isn't as difficult as it sounds. The other piece that would go with it, and that is all, is that at the high school level, I've said this before, and in many ways, we need to have optional curricula for students to choose from. Not everybody wants to go to college, needs to go to college. There are many other perfectly noble occupations. There are many occupations that do not require a college degree from. And so we need to allow student choice as they do allow it in most other countries. And I think that's all I will say. Did I get it within?
Yes, you're good.
A little over. All right, sorry. I'm waiting for you to wave your hand. Wrap up. I see it. I'm sorry. Okay.